She walked in slowly and left me speechless. The observation deck of the human station hummed with its usual quiet efficiency. When the doors opened and she entered the room, like gravity itself had shifted to accommodate her presence, Lieutenant. Jake Morrison had seen plenty of aliens during his 3 years stationed at the edge of known space, but nothing could have prepared him for the moment when Ambassador Liara of the Valexian Empire walked through those doors. She moved with a grace that seemed to defy the artificial gravity beneath her feet, and her skin shimmered with patterns that changed color based on her emotions or so. Jake had read in the briefing files he had barely skimmed that morning the other humans in the observation deck stopped their conversations mid-sentence, and Jake felt his datapad slip from his fingers, though he caught it just before it clattered to the floor. Liara stood nearly 7 feet tall, with features that were both alien and impossibly elegant, and her eyes were the color of distant nebulas swirling with depths that seemed to hold entire galaxies. Commander Helen Brooks, the station commander, stepped forward to greet the ambassador with practiced diplomatic courtesy, but even Helen seemed momentarily rattled by the visitor's presence. Jake had been assigned as the ambassador's liaison during her week-long visit to the station, and he suddenly felt completely unprepared for the task. Despite his training, the briefing had mentioned that Valexians were telepathic to some degree and could sense strong emotions, and Jake desperately tried to calm his racing thoughts. Liara turned those cosmic eyes in his direction. She crossed the observation deck toward him, and each step seemed choreographed by some universal force that understood movement better than any human dancer ever could. "Hello, Lieutenant Morrison." Her voice came out like music filtered through crystal-clear water, and Jake realized she was speaking English with barely a trace of an accent. He managed to stammer out a greeting and extended his hand in the traditional human gesture before remembering too late that Valexians considered physical contact highly intimate among strangers. But Liara smiled, showing teeth that were just slightly too sharp to be human, and gently took his hand in hers, and her skin felt warm and textured like soft leather embedded with tiny scales. Touch sent an electric sensation up Jake's arm, and he saw her skin patterns shift to a warm golden hue that the briefing had identified as amusement or pleasure. "I've been looking forward to meeting you, Lieutenant," she said, still holding his hand for what felt like both an eternity and not nearly long enough. Jake finally found his voice and began the standard welcome protocol he had practiced, though the words came out less smoothly than he had hoped over. The next several hours he gave Liara a tour of the station, showing her the hydroponics bay, the medical center, the recreation areas, and the engineering sections. She asked thoughtful questions about everything and seemed genuinely interested in even the mundane details of human life aboard the station in the hydroponics bay. She paused before a section of earth plants and reached out to gently touch the leaves of a tomato plant with reverence. "These grow food for your people," she said, and it was a statement rather than a question. But Jake confirmed it anyway. "In my world, we cultivate living ships that grow in orbital gardens, and the food comes from symbiotic organisms that live within the ship's hull," she explained. Jake found himself fascinated not just by her words, but by the way her skin patterns shifted through different colors as she spoke. Deep blues for serious topics, soft greens for curiosity, bright oranges when she was excited about something. They spent the afternoon in the station's small museum where humanity had collected artifacts representing Earth culture to share with alien visitors. Liara examined everything with intense focus, from ancient books printed on paper to modern holographic art displays, and she asked Jake to explain the significance of each item. When they reached a display featuring music from various Earth cultures, Jake activated the audio system and let samples play from classical symphonies to jazz to electronic compositions. Leia's patterns exploded into a riot of colors during the music, and she closed her eyes, swaying slightly to rhythms that probably translated strangely to her alien biology or species. "Put such emotion into sound patterns," she said when the samples ended, and Jake noticed her patterns had settled into a deep purple that the briefing identified as profound thoughtfulness. That evening, Jake escorted Liara to her quarters, which had been specially prepared with environmental controls adjusted for Valexian comfort. Before she entered, she turned to face him fully, and Jake felt his breath catch again at her presence tomorrow. "I would like to see where humans gather informally," she said, and her patterns shifted to a soft pink color that Jake didn't recognize from his. "Briefing the recreation lounge," Jake suggested, and Liara nodded with what seemed like satisfaction before bidding him good night in her musical voice. Jake barely slept that night, running through conversations in his mind and trying to understand why this particular alien affected him so differently than any other. The next morning, he met Liara at her quarters and found her wearing what appeared to be Valexian formal attire that somehow made her even more striking than before. They walked together through the station's corridors, and Jake noticed how other crew members stopped to stare, though Liara seemed either oblivious or accustomed to the attention. The recreation lounge was moderately busy with off-duty personnel, playing games, watching entertainment, or simply socializing. Liara observed everything with keen interest, and when a group of engineers invited them to join a card game, she accepted immediately. Jake had to explain the rules of poker several times, but Liara caught on quickly, and within an hour she was winning hands with a frequency that suggested either incredible luck or an ability to read the other players that went beyond normal perception. Engineers took their losses good-naturedly and seemed charmed by the alien ambassador, who laughed at their jokes and asked about their families back on Earth. One engineer named Carlos mentioned that his daughter was studying xenobiology and hoped to work with alien species someday. Liara listened with genuine warmth and told Carlos that his daughter would be welcome to apply for study exchange programs with the Valexian Empire. Jake watched as Liara seamlessly connected with each person she met, and he realized that her appeal wasn't just physical, but came from a deep charisma that transcended species boundaries. Later, they sat together in a quiet corner of the lounge, and Liara asked Jake about his own background, his family, his reasons for joining the space service. He found himself opening up in ways he normally didn't, talking about his childhood in rural Montana, his mother's illness that had inspired him to work toward a future where medical technology could save everyone, his dreams of exploration beyond the known galaxy. Liara
that's listened
without interruption, and her patterns settled into soft, warm colors that made Jake feel completely understood. "Your species is young," she said finally, "but you have such passion for reaching beyond yourselves, and many older species have lost that." Curiosity, Jake asked about her own people, and Liara spoke of the Valexian Empire, which spanned dozens of star systems and had existed for thousands of years. She described cities that grew like living organisms, architecture that responded to the needs and emotions of inhabitants, and art forms that humans couldn't perceive because they engaged senses that humanity didn't possess. But there was something in her tone, a hint of loneliness, when she mentioned that Valexians lived much longer than humans and formed fewer deep connections because of it. The days that followed fell into a pattern of formal meetings and diplomatic discussions in the mornings, followed by informal time where Jake showed Liara different aspects of station life. They watched Earth movies in the entertainment center, and Liara was particularly moved by a romantic comedy that Jake had thought was fairly mediocre, the concept of such brief lives finding connection. Despite obstacles, she said, and her patterns rippled with emotions Jake was learning to read as bittersweet appreciation. They exercised together in the station's gym, where Liara demonstrated Valexian martial arts that looked like a combination of dance and combat, and moved with such fluidity that Jake could only watch in awe. She tried to teach him some basic moves, and her hands on his arms guiding his posture sent those same electric sensations through his body. And the fourth day of her visit, the station received an emergency distress call from a mining colony 2 systems away that was experiencing critical life support failures. Commander Brooks immediately began coordinating a rescue mission, but it would take the station's emergency response team hours to reach the colony. Liara stepped forward and offered the use of her personal ship, which was docked at the station and was equipped with Valexian technology that could make the journey in a fraction of the time. Brooks accepted gratefully, and Liara insisted that Jake accompany her as the human liaison. Her ship was unlike anything Jake had seen before, all organic curves and surfaces that seemed to breathe and pulse with life. Interior was decorated in ways that were both alien and somehow comfortable, with seating that adjusted automatically to support human physiology. moved to what appeared to be the command center. An interface with the ship in a way that seemed partly technological and partly telepathic. The journey, that should have taken hours, took only minutes as the ship moved through space in ways that Jake